Right now, major home builders are quietly paying banks these just massive upfront fees to like artificially lower your mortgage rate.
Yeah, it's a completely fascinating standoff in the housing market right now.
Right, because, they are absolutely terrified of touching the sticker price on their unsold inventory.
Exactly. I mean, the whole macroeconomic environment has shifted so dramatically lately. Affordability has basically hit a wall for a lot of people, especially first-time homebuyers.
Oh, absolutely. It's rough out
It
there.
really is. And the traditional levers of real estate, they're just failing.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
builders are bypassing the top line price entirely. They're using this sort of back channel financial engineering to move properties instead.
And well, that financial engineering is exactly what we are analyzing today. We've got this stack of recent announcements and curriculum materials from New Home University.
Right, which are super insightful.
Yeah, they really are. So, our mission for this deep dive is to examine this counterintuitive workaround in the new home construction market. It basically stacks these massive builder subsidies with independent educational grants.
It's a completely different way to calculate the math of homeownership for you.
Totally. But before we get into the actual mechanics, we should probably set the table, right? Yeah.
Let's establish a baseline. We are looking at a highly localized,
Yeah.
highly variable set of programs here. Like there is no universal magic wand.
Right. It's not a one-size-fits-all thing.
Not at all. We're analyzing how qualified buyers in the new home market can potentially access this expanded grant program from New Home University, while, simultaneously leveraging those surprising builder incentives you mentioned.
Which is huge because the differentiator between a buyer who just assumes they're locked out and a buyer who actually closes on a house, it's an aggressive understanding of these financial levers.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Think of it like a baker, right? If a baker has a surplus of bread at the end of the day, they usually just discount the loaves.
Right. Clearance sale.
Exactly. But a home builder with an unsold house doesn't just slash the sticker price. Why? I mean, if a builder refuses to drop the top line price to protect their neighborhood comms, how are they physically subsidizing the loan without it showing up as a price reduction on the tax records?
Well, they do it primarily through this mechanism called a mortgage rate buydown.
Okay, a rate buy down.
Yeah. And to understand why this is like their preferred weapon of choice, you really have to look at the builder's balance sheet.
Right.
If a builder slashes the sticker price of a completed home by, say, $40,000,
Which sounds great for the buyer.
it does.
Hmm.
But for the builder, they instantly devalue the collateral of every single other home they just sold in that phase of the development.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that would infuriate the previous buyer.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
But more importantly, it alarms their institutional lenders. The banks that rely on those comparable sales, the comps, to secure the construction loans in the first place.
Right, right. Because the entire financial model of a new subdivision relies on those final appraised values continually stepping upward or, at least holding steady.
Exactly. Dropping the MSRP is basically financial suicide for the project's overall valuation.
So instead of a price cut, they take that $40,000 they would have lost and they just hand it directly to the buyer's mortgage lender.
Precisely. They essentially prepay the interest for the buyer upfront.
That's wild.
It is. By buying down the mortgage points, the builder physically reduces the buyer's interest rate for the entire life of the loan. Or sometimes it's for the first few years in what they call a temporary buy-down structure.
Okay, so what kind of rates are we actually talking about here?
Well, according to the source materials we're reviewing, on select new homes and with specific financing programs, qualified purchasers are sometimes securing promotional interest rates as low as, approximately 4.99%.
Wait, really? 4.99%?
Yeah.
That is a staggering reduction in this current rate environment. I mean, if we look at the debt-to-income math, that explains exactly why the builders prefer it.
How so?
Well, think about it. A $40,000 price drop might save a buyer, a couple $100 a month on their payment.
Right.
But taking that exact same $40,000 and using it to buy a 7% rate down to 4.99%, that completely changes the monthly affordability. It shaves off significantly more from the monthly payment.
You've hit on the exact algorithmic advantage there. It solves the DTI, the debt-to-income ratio problem.
Which is the exact thing locking so many first-time homebuyers out right now.
Exactly. But here's the thing. The rate buy-down is just like the anchor tenant of the incentive package. Builders are heavily utilizing other concessions to keep actual cash in the buyer's pocket at the closing table.
Okay, so if they're willing to hemorrhage cash on rate buy-downs just to protect their comps, I have to assume they're also eating other upfront costs to get hesitant buyers across the finish line.
Oh, totally.
What else is showing up in these builder packages?
So the sources outline this really robust menu of secondary incentives, particularly on what they call quick move-in homes.
The standing inventory.
Right, the completed houses that are literally costing the builder daily capital just sitting empty.
Right, because of carrying costs.
Exactly. So we are seeing builders cover comprehensive closing costs, meaning they pay the origination fees, the title insurance, local recording taxes.
So the buyer doesn't have to bring all that extra cash to the table.
Bingo. They are also offering Flex Cash, which is essentially a credit at the builder's design center for upgrades.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, or they're throwing in premium appliance packages that would normally cost the buyer, $10,000 to $15,000 out of pocket.
Okay, 4.99% plus appliances and closing costs is incredibly attractive. But that kind of begs the question of volatility, right?
Oh, for sure.
Because these aren't permanent fixtures in the market. If they were bleeding cash to subsidize these loans, they must be highly aggressive with their timelines.
That is a super vital caveat we have to establish here. These promotions are entirely ephemeral. Like, what is heavily subsidized today might just vanish next week if the builder hits their monthly sales quota.
Wow, really? Just gone.
Just gone. That 4.99% rate is heavily dependent on a whole matrix of things: your personal credit qualifications, the specific subdivision, the loan program, and really strict closing date requirements.
Which honestly exposes a massive asymmetry of information in the market.
Oh, completely.
Because if this whole ecosystem of massive subsidies exists, a standard first-time home buyer who's just, scrolling through a real estate app, they just see the terrifying sticker price at a 7% national rate.
Right.
And they naturally assume they are priced out. They don't see the shadow inventory of financing options. So who is actually bridging that gap? Who's telling people about this?
Well, that structural gap in the market is exactly where Jubril Wilson enters our source material.
Okay.
He operates in the industry under the name Coach JB, and he's the founder of New Home University.
All right.
His entire organizational mandate is to systematically dismantle that information asymmetry you just mentioned.
Oh, that's interesting. So he's targeting the education side.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
He targets the first-time home buyer demographic specifically to educate them on these exact localized opportunities within new home construction.
And looking at the materials, the philosophy of Coach JB and New Home University is summarized in this very specific directive. They say, do not assume you cannot afford a new home until you understand your options.
Which is such a powerful mindset shift.
It really is. It's essentially a mandate to stop doing back-of-the-napkin math based on retail rates and to start calculating your affordability based on subsidized institutional rates.
Right. It requires a complete reprogramming of how a buyer approaches the market.
Definitely.
The curriculum Coach JB's team deploys focuses heavily on the underlying mechanics of these real estate transactions. Like, they train families on how different localized new home communities actually operate financially.
So they're teaching them the actual math.
Exactly. They teach them how to model out their actual monthly payments when a builder's rate buydown is factored into the amortization schedule. And most crucially, they guide buyers towards specialized financing programs and separate grant opportunities that the general public is just largely blind to.
Okay, so education and financial modeling form the baseline of their operation. But analyzing the latest announcements from New Home University, there's a massive operational shift happening here.
A huge one, yeah.
They aren't just providing the curriculum anymore, they're injecting actual capital into the transaction. New Home University has secured funding to significantly expand their own NHU Grant program.
Yes. This represents a substantial escalation in their market intervention. Because of this newly secured funding pool, qualified buyers purchasing new home construction can now potentially receive an NHU grant ranging from $1,500 up to $5,000.
Okay, I need to push back on the mechanics of this funding for a second.
Sure.
Because educational platforms don't just, print money. If they're handing out up to $5,000 to first-time home buyers, what is the economic engine driving a grant like this? Like, how is this capital being generated and distributed?
That's a great question. It basically operates on a reallocation model.
Okay, what does that mean?
Well, in the broader ecosystem of real estate, significant capital is traditionally spent on customer acquisition, right? Marketing, lead generation, billboards.
I'm sure, finding the buyers.
Exactly. Organizations like New Home University often aggregate funding through strategic industry partnerships. So what we are seeing with the NHU grant is essentially a direct reallocation of those funds. Instead of spending that capital on traditional advertising, they're putting it directly into the hands of the consumer to lower the barrier to entry and facilitate the actual transaction.
Wow, so it's a sliding scale based on the transaction specifics.
So,
They're subsidizing the final mile of the purchase.
precisely.
But that brings up the exact parameters of the payout. A $1,500 floor to a $5,000 ceiling is a pretty wide variance. What dictates who gets what? Does someone just show up and get handed a $5,000 check?
No, it's not a flat distribution at all. The final grant amount is governed by a pretty strict algorithmic matrix.
Okay, so there are rules.
Lots of rules. The capital you might receive depends on the specific geographic market, the exact new home community you select, the tier of the home model.
So how expensive the house is.
Right. And it also depends on the available liquidity in the NHU grant pool at the exact moment of your closing and your adherence to their specific program requirements.
That makes sense. And that brings us to what the sources refer to as the double opportunity concept.
Yes, this is my favorite part.
It's where the financial modeling gets highly complex, but potentially highly lucrative for the buyer. Because we were talking about stacking capital from two completely independent directions, right?
Exactly. On one side of the ledger, you have the builder. The buyer might successfully negotiate the builder's rate buy-down, dropping their interest to that promotional 4.99% while also getting their title fees covered.
Great.
But then, on the other side of the ledger, you have New Home University. That exact same buyer could simultaneously qualify for the NHU grant, bringing an additional $1,500 to $5,000 to the closing table.
Wait, okay. If New Home University is bringing up to $5,000 and the builder is bringing a massive rate buy-down, there has to be a structural conflict somewhere in the underwriting. Right. Well, are buyers restricted to using only the builder's affiliated lender to get both of these? Because builders notoriously hold those rate buy-downs hostage unless you use their specific in-house bank.
You've identified the primary friction point in these transactions. Yes, to access a builder's specific promotional rate or closing cost assistance, you are almost always required to utilize their preferred affiliated lender.
Right, because they want to control the timeline.
Exactly. They do it to control the transaction timeline and keep that financing revenue in-house. However, and this is key, the NHU grant is an entirely separate entity.
Okay.
It operates independently of the builder's corporate structure. The complexity and, honestly, the reason New Home University heavily emphasizes education is learning how to navigate the underwriting process so you can satisfy the builder's lender requirements while simultaneously qualifying for the external NHU grant.
So qualifying for one does not automatically trigger qualification for the other.
Not at all. They are separate pools of money with separate rules.
Which completely contextualizes why Coach JB's approach is explicitly anti-rush. Because if a buyer just runs out today and signs a contract on a spec home without understanding the lender requirements, they could easily lock themselves out of the external grant money.
Yep, they could leave thousands of dollars on the table.
The directive from New Home University isn't to go buy a house right now, it's to map out the math first.
Right, because the market moves way too fast for assumptions. Coach JB's methodology requires buyers to pause and audit their position.
Before you ever fall in love with a floor plan.
Before you even tour a model home, you need to know your exact DTI. You need to know which builders in your target zip code are currently heavily subsidizing rates. You need to verify if the NHU grant pool has capital available for that specific subdivision.
And whether your payout would be $1,500 or the full $5,000.
Precisely. You are essentially building a pro forma for your own home purchase.
Okay, but looking at Coach JB's material, their funnel is built entirely around removing the entry friction to actually get that pro forma started. Because normally entering the real estate market requires filling out a dense pre-qualification form with a dozen pages of financial disclosures just to get someone on the phone.
Oh, it's exhausting.
It is. But New Home University's intake process starts with a single keyword.
Yeah, it's a highly efficient lead capture mechanism. If you want to access this curriculum, discover what builder incentives are active in your market, and find out what portion of the NHU grant you actually qualify for, the initial step is simply to message the word grant.
Let me spell that out for absolute clarity for you. You just message the word grant, G-R-A-N-T.
Right. And by initiating contact with that keyword, you are connected directly into Coach JB's team at New Home University.
So no cold calls or annoying automated emails.
No, it bypasses that traditional hard sell and immediately starts the educational and qualification process. Alternatively, for those who prefer web interfaces, the pathway is just as direct.
Where they go.
You navigate to newhomeuniversity.com, and the directive upon connecting with their team there is to simply state, I want information about the NHU Grant.
It's an interesting approach to customer acquisition. It prioritizes immediate conversation and strategic alignment over, like, a high-pressure sales tactic.
It really does.
Because it acknowledges that the landscape of rate buydowns and stacked grants is far too murky for a first-time buyer to navigate without an institutional guide.
And, that guidance extends beyond the immediate time frame, too.
How so?
Well, if a buyer analyzes their localized data with the NHU team and realizes, hey, the math still doesn't work for me today, the objective has still been met.
Oh, because they're educated now.
Exactly. They are educated on the mechanics, they know what benchmarks they need to hit for the future, and they can pass that keyword and website along to other families who might be operating under the false assumption that they are entirely locked out of the market.
That makes a lot of sense. So, tracing the logic of our analysis today, we started with the macroeconomic pressure on home builders who are actively choosing to spend tens of thousands of dollars on mortgage rate buydowns and closing costs rather than devaluing their neighborhood comparables with public price cuts.
A huge paradigm shift.
Right. Then we examined how Coach JB and New Home University are systematically educating first-time home buyers to actually find and leverage those hidden financial subsidies.
Right.
And finally, we broke down the mechanics of the expanded NHU grant, this independent capital injection of $1,500 to $5,000 that qualified buyers can potentially stack right on top of those builder concessions.
Just to force the math of homeownership to work in their favor.
Exactly.
It requires an entirely different level of financial literacy than the market demanded, say, 3 years ago. And I think it perfectly encapsulates New Home University's core organizational motto: new home, new health, new wealth, new possibilities.
New home, new health, new wealth, new possibilities. It frames the home not just as a shelter, but as like the foundational asset of a wider financial strategy.
It does.
Now, as we synthesize these source materials, we obviously have to deliver the requisite regulatory and market disclaimers.
Yes, definitely. Because financial modeling requires acknowledging volatility.
Always.
Every figure and program we have analyzed today is subject to immediate market fluctuation. Grant funding pools, specific monetary amounts, the availability of builder incentives, and mortgage rates, including that promotional 4.99% benchmark, they are fluid.
They change daily.
Exactly. They're dictated by localized market conditions, your individual credit profile, and strict lender program requirements. Nothing is permanently guaranteed in this sector.
Which really underscores the necessity of messaging the word GRANT or utilizing newhomeuniversity.com to pull the real-time data for your specific financial profile rather than, relying on outdated market assumptions.
The market rewards the informed. You have to audit your specific variables.
Absolutely. As we close out this deep dive, I want to leave you with a macro-level thought to mull over.
Okay.
We spent today dissecting the new home construction market, right? Uncovering this entirely separate ecosystem of capital grants, rate subsidies, and financial engineering that just operates silently in the background.
Hidden in plain sight.
Exactly. It only becomes visible when you find the right institutional guide to translate the mechanics for you. And it makes you wonder, if an industry as massive and heavily regulated as residential real estate has this level of a secret menu operating just below the surface, simply because the general public haven't been educated on how to ask for it.
Oh, that's a great point.
Right. What other major life investments, from healthcare pricing to higher education financing, are out there operating on the exact same principles of information asymmetry?
It is a profound structural question. The leverage always belongs to the party that understands the underlying math.
It always does. Keep questioning the mechanics behind the sticker price, and don't assume the door is locked until you understand how the lock actually works.